The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Francis Donald here, and welcome to number 6. This and all subsequent webinars, Secret Doctrine webinars, will be available on makara.us under the subtitle Open Webinars. You see it there on the bottom left, which will open the page on the right, and you can find that series of webinars. Okay, we begin each webinar by tracing HPB and Colonel Olcott's travels as described in Olcott's old diary leaves. Last month we found our intrepid pair on the banks of the Jumna River in Allahabad, communing with the holy man Babu Surdas, who's actually a historical figure who's remembered to this day and has a following. You see him on your screen. This month, we find them taking passage by elephant to the palace complex of Suraj Mahal. Today's reading focuses on 19th century India's color and environment rather than, as usually is the case, on a particular esoteric event. So we're going to need 3 readers for this passage. As always, this is Colonel Olcott's narrative. So let's choose all 3 readers up front, and I'll just shift slides when we move to the next reader.
Okay, let's start with Michael, Stacy, then Victor, and then Yvonne, please. Okay. So let's go ahead, please, Michael.
At 3 p.m., we mounted an elephant for a visit to Jajamwao, an ancient ruined city 4 miles from Kanpur, which is said to have been the capital of the lunar race in 5000 BC. There was no howdah cab on the elephant, whose florid name was Chenchal-Peri, the active fairy, but only a pad or large mattress, which is strapped on by huge girths fastening under the animal's body. It requires some skill and a good balance to keep on this seat when the animal is in motion. And I leave the acquaintances of HVB to imagine what happened when she turned rider along with 4 other neophytes to share the limited area of cushion. Out of politeness, we first helped her up the short ladder, of course expecting that she would play us fair, but not she indeed. She planted herself square in the middle of the pad, and not 1 inch would she budge to give us a chance. In fact, her expressions were extremely forcible when we asked her to remember that she was not to have the pad all to herself. So, as Chenchal-Pari's ears began to flap, and she showed other signs of impatience at our wrangling, we 4, W. Scott, Mulji, Babula, and I, scrambled up and stuck on somehow at the corners as best we could contrive. Scott sat towards the rear and, letting 1 leg hang down, the she-elephant benevolently threw her tail over his ankle and held him firmly to his seat.
Okay, whoever's next.
Victor, please go ahead. Victor,
Hello?
we can't hear you. Can you read for us, please?
Then we started HPB smoking, radiant, and as though she had been an elephant rider from her youth upward. But the first quarter of a mile took the conceit out of her. She rolled about unwillingly, getting her fat shaken up and her breath squeezed out of her until she grew furious and consigned us laughters, together with the elephant and its Mahout, to perdition. Throughout the 4 miles, which HPB vowed were 20, we rode in misery and she in wrath. Thence on to Birchpur, Rajputana, by way of Agra. We were now on what, to my chum and myself, was classic ground, for it was associated with the history of the splendid solar race of Rajputs, to which our own teacher belongs, and which enchains all our sympathies. The Maharaja was not at home, but the Diwan gave us the hospitalities of the state, put us up at the Dak bungalow, sent us carriages, held discussions with us on philosophical subjects, and gave us facilities to visit the ancient palace of Sorja Mall at Diga, 23 miles away.
Okay, third reader.
Here we found ourselves for almost the first time in the ideal Orient, the East of poetry. 9 palaces, each bearing a different name of a god, stand in a quadrangle around a shady garden, the whole called Bhawan. The center of the garden is marked with a domed marble water kiosk, surrounded by a shallow tank, from which rise 175 water jets, met by streams that fall from an equal number of nozzles projecting from the underside of the cornice of the structure, and when in play, shroud the occupants from view by a translucent wall of water, which keeps the air deliciously cool in the hottest day, and sparkles in the sunshine like a silver veil embroidered with gems. From this center, raised walks radiate in every direction, and one strolls about under the cool shade of neem, tamarind, mango, babul, banyan, and pipal trees. No less than 100 grand peacocks were strutting about on the day of our visit. Swift parrots darted in emerald flashes through the air. Striped squirrels flitted from tree to tree, and flocks of doves softly called to each other in the dense foliage, completing an ideally beautiful picture. The palace architecture is all Indian, the carvings in stone exquisite in design, and the angles as sharp as if but finished yesterday. In the Zanana Palace, Suraj Mall, every room has a tessellated marble floor of a different design from the rest. The lintels and frames are in pure statuary marble, decorated with patterns of climbing vines in high relief.
Okay, thank you. We'll continue with HPB's adventures next time. For now, let's get back to the Proem. As I've mentioned, we are very lucky to have the Sanskrit scholar David Regal attend these webinars, though he couldn't be with us today. He had business up in Denver. He studied the Secret Doctrine extensively and is thus able to provide us with some invaluable insights as well as occasional correction. Here are his notes concerning our last month's webinar. Could we get a reader for this?
Sure. Asha, can you read this for us, please?
Yes. Regarding the term para-Brahman, the online, excuse me, I actually loved the other pages and the thing about HPB and her kind of ill temper. It was so hilarious.
Oh, great. Yeah. She was quite a salty character.
I know. It just makes me realize that a high soul can have such an ill temper. Regarding the term para-Brahman, the online theosophical glossary, once again, like the Svabhavat, cannot always be relied on for Sanskrit words. This error, that para-Brahman means beyond Brahman, is a serious one. For all Hindus, Brahma-Brahman is a synonym of Brahman, neuter, the absolute. De Kruger had misunderstood this Sanskrit compound. Blavatsky before him had also misunderstood it, saying in her theosophical glossary that Brahma-Brahman means beyond Brahma, masculine, the creator. Neither of these are correct. The word para-Brahman means the highest Brahman, and no Hindu would take it in any other way. On a bibliography.
Okay, so he's basically saying that Para-Brahman and Brahman as neuter both refer to the absolute. And so therefore you can't have that which is beyond Brahman, the neuter. So it's, you know, some of these corrections may seem like splitting hairs to some, but they actually have some important philosophical ramifications. So if you read the next item, which is even more a bit of minutia, but it's to set the record straight, it's important to include this. So go ahead, if you would, please.
On a bibliographic item, the reference to Mandukya Upanishad from Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, page 6, is wrong. The Mandukya Upanishad only has 12 verses. The reference should be to Mandukya Upanishad 2.2.8, not 2.28. There are many errors like this in the Secret Doctrine. Boris Dezerkov spent many years correcting the ones he could, hundreds of them. Unfortunately, the only edition of the Secret Doctrine available online is the original one, not the carefully corrected one by Boris Dezerkov, published in '78 by the Theosophical Publishing House, Adyar. His edition is very helpful for serious study.
Thank you. Okay, so we finished the last webinar with this footnote. This was the last image. The very names of the two chief deities, Brahma and Vishnu, ought to have long ago suggested their esoteric meanings. For the root of one, Brahman or Brahm, is derived by some from the word bri, to grow or to expand, and of the other, Vishnu, from the root vis, to pervade, to enter in the nature of the essence. So Brahma Vishnu, being the infinite space of which the gods, the rishis, the manus, and all in this universe are simply the potencies, vibhutaya. Okay, so she's making the point here, she is making the point here that you want to avoid the mistake of imagining a personified being in either Brahma, Shiva, or Vishnu, that these represent rather the manifested universe and space in its esoteric connotations. So let's get back to the main text and move ahead. Could we get a reader for this section?
Anne, can you read for us, please?
Yes. There is no difference between the Christian apostle. In him we live and move and have our being. And the Hindu rishis, the universe lives in, proceeds from, and will return to Brahma. For Brahma, Neuter, the unmanifest, Neuter, the unmanifest is that universe in abscondito, secret.
Yeah, which means secret, yeah.
And Brahma, the manifested, is the logos, made male, female, in the symbolic orthodox dogmas. The God of the apostle initiate and of the Rishi, being both the unseen and the visible space. Space is called in the esoteric symbolism the seven-skinned eternal Mother Father. It is composed from its undifferentiated to its differentiated surface of 7 layers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So from a traditional esoteric perspective, these 7 layers are the elements: air, fire, water, and earth, plus 3 unmanifest elements. From a theosophical perspective, these elements are related to the 7 cosmic physical planes, from the cosmic Adi down to the cosmic physical plane, then once again to the subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. These 7 skins are animated by what are called the 7 brothers of Fohat, which refer to those great agents of conscious electricity, of which Lord Agni is one of the cosmic ones. But we'll get into Fohat later on in the Proem. Fascinating subject. Okay, on to the footnote. And let's see, I'll just read the text myself here first. See Manu's account of Brahma separating his body into male and female, the latter, the female, Vash, in whom he creates Viraj, and compare this with the esotericism of chapters 2, 3, and 4 of Genesis. Okay, we'll do that in a minute. But first, let's come up to speed on the term Vash. Could somebody read this definition, please?
Antoinette, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Vash, sound, voice, word, the mystic sound. Svara, or essence of spirit of the divine creative activity, the vehicle of divine thought, and of this the word is the manifested expression. Vash, or its equivalence in other cultures, is always considered feminine. Cosmically, she is the carrier of, or mother of, the third logos, the word or verbum, because of carrying perpetually within her the essence of divine thought. The first logos, and hence Vash, is the second logos, equivalent to the early Christian Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost, later transmogrified into a cosmic male. In Hindu mythology, Brahma separates his body into masculine and feminine, the feminine becoming Vash, in whom he creates Viraj, who is himself again Brahma. Here we have the 3 logoi: Brahma, the first logos, the divine thought, Vash, the second logos, the divine voice, and Viraj, the third logos, or the divine word, the philosophical equivalent of the Son of the Christian Trinity.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions about this, this aspect, this philosophical trinity, or any thoughts about this? You see this illustration of, it actually starts above this with the neuter Brahman, and then you have this splitting of the male, female, and then the full separation indicated. It's an aspect of Gemini. Actually, this is a Gemini card in that way, but also is appropriate for this idea. All done, this process of manifestation through the word, which is a feminine persona. So, do we have any thoughts on this subject?
Yes. Asha wants to know, how does this compare to Adam's rib and Eve?
Well, this would be much the more esoteric. The idea, it's interesting, you know, the rib of Adam and the diameter of the circle. I think it's very possible that this is a deeply veiled symbol for that diameter, the rib itself, that is, which then becomes the second logos. And yes, along in terms of the separation of the sexes, it's the way it's indicated in the Adam and Eve story is through the eating of the apple of knowledge. Separation from God is then perceived, and that is an illusory, and the esotericists would say, but necessary separation, which then drove them, that act drove them from the garden. But it had to happen. It was predestined. And it's the nature of moving into the form aspect, especially into the fifth root race, the Aryan, and its mental purpose. Okay, any other thoughts, questions?
I don't see any at this time.
Okay, so let's take a look at the footnote again, which says, let's see Manu's account of the separation and compare it with the esotericism of chapters 2, 3, and 4 of Genesis. Well, I reread those just to see what I could gain, and Genesis 2 is mostly about the creation of man and woman. 3 is about the tree of good and evil. And 4 concerns itself mostly with Cain and Abel. The most esoteric verse, in my opinion, comes from chapter 2, verse 7, which reads, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living soul." So what you have here is this duality of spirit and matter taking at its most polar opposites, the dust of the earth and the breath of God. It's also an interesting allusion to the idea of the great breath being that which brings matter into life. And we'll be getting into the great breath in a little bit. But nobody got it quite as right as Larson, the little cartoon up there in the upper right. He always seemed to be able to put his finger right on it, right? Okay, so let's move on to the next. Now we're back to the text. Can we get a reader for this?
Rosewitha, can you read for us, please? You're muted right now. You muted yourself, so. There you go.
I have a cold and I'd like to pass, please.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How about you, Roz? Can you read for us? You're self-muted as well.
Just click on your little mic icon there to the upper left of your little control panel. Just do a single click and it should unmute you.
No, it's not happening. Let's move on.
Okay.
Star, can you read for us, please? Your mic is open. We can hear you. Can you read for us, please?
I'll try.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
What is that which was, is, and will be, whether there is a universe or not, whether there be gods or none, asks the Esoteric Censor Catechism. And the answer made is space. It is not the one unknown, ever-present God and nature, or nature in abscondito, that is rejected, but the God of human dogma and his humanized word. In his infinite conceit and inherent pride and vanity, man shaped it himself with his sacrilegious hand out of the material he found in his own small brain fabric, and forced it upon mankind as a direct revelation from the one unrevealed space. Secret Doctrine.
Yeah, thank you. So we see, one of the, arguably the greatest illustrations of what came from our own small brain fabric, right? This very anthropomorphized Sistine Chapel ceiling illustration of God and Son. Nonetheless, this is one of all the beauty here aside. This is one of HPB's favorite soapboxes to point out the extraordinarily finite level that, especially in the West and traditional Christianity and other, such as Islam and Jewish religions, that their highest God is very much a personalized, anthropomorphized entity. And so we'll be hearing the occasional diss of these concepts as we move through the Secret Doctrine. Well, thanks for the reading, and we're just going to move on from this. On to the footnote. So could we get a reader for that footnote, please? This points to a work by Henry Pratt.
Okay. Joy, can you read for us, please?
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You can. Yep. Occultism is indeed in the air at the close of this, our century. Among many other works recently published, we will recommend one especially to students of theoretical occultism who would not venture beyond the realm of our special human plane. It is called New Aspects of Life and Religion by Henry Pratt, MD. What is said of space as the unknown first cause merits quotation. This unknown something, thus recognized as and identified with the primary embodiment of simple unity, is invisible and impalpable. Abstract space granted. And because invisible and impalpable, therefore incognizable. And this incognizability has led to the error of supposing it to be a simple void, a mere receptive capacity. But, even viewed as an absolute void, space must be admitted to be either self-existent, infinite and eternal, or to have had a first cause outside, behind, and beyond itself. And yet, could such a cause be found and defined, this would only lead to the transferring thereto of the attributes otherwise accruing to space, and thus merely throw the difficulty of origination a step farther back, without gaining additional light as to primary causation.
Okay, so that's the quote from Life and Religion, New Aspects of Life and Religion. Now, if you would continue to read, this is HPB's comment on that quote.
Right. This is precisely what has been done by the believers in an anthropomorphic creator, an extracosmic instead of an intracosmic God. Many, most of Mr. Pratt's subjects, we may say, are old Kabbalistic ideas, and theories, which he presents in quite a new garb. New aspects of the occult in nature indeed. Space, however viewed as a substantial unity, the living source of life, as the unknown causeless cause, is the oldest dogma in occultism, millenniums earlier than the Aether of the Greeks and Latins. Just correcting in my pronunciation.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So are the force and matter as potencies of space, inseparable, and the unknown revealers of the unknown. They are all found in Aryan philosophy, personified by Vishvakarman, Indra, Vishnu, etc. Still, they are expressed very philosophically and under many unusual aspects in the work referred to. SD 1, page 9.
That's all right. You don't have to read the...
okay, those things.
Yeah. So again, we have her pointing out, this has been a theme all through, the difference between the intra and the extra, you could say, cosmic Godhead, right? And it's an important distinction, and we've been reading about it now for some time, the concept of the unknown causeless cause versus no matter how high any manifested living source of life, right? So it's an important distinction, and she will continue to describe it to us. Any thoughts or questions about this idea? One of the clues that comes up is when you reach the level of the combined sexes of the father-mother, you have moved beyond the generative aspect of the of deity. But even then, you can still be at a level of manifestation in the purely abstract levels. The abstract is still, if it exists in the Manvantara, in the time of manifestation, it still is conditioned. It's only that absolute one which exists beyond time and space that is truly can be called the intracosmic God. Okay. Any thoughts, any ideas on this before we move on?
I don't see any.
Okay, fine. Let's move right along then. These are becoming familiar concepts, and even though this is can be difficult material because of all the Sanskrit, the repetition is good for gaining an understanding of these ideas. So, okay, let's read the definition first of Akasha, and then move on to the text itself.
Joanna, can you read for us, please?
I can't unmute myself.
Oh, actually, you're fine. We hear you.
Oh, great. Okay. Akasha, Sanskrit, from ah, the verbal root cause, to be visible, appear, shine, be brilliant. The shining ether, cosmic space, the fifth cosmic element, the subtle, supersensuous, spiritual essence which pervades all space. Mahamanvantara.
Mahamanvantara. It's a very hard word to say. Mahamanvantara. Maha means the great. So it's in Manvantara is related to a time period. So this is, well, you'll read what it is. Okay. Mahamanvantara. Go ahead.
Okay. Mahamanvantara, Sanskrit from Maha, great, and Manvantara, period of manifestation. A great cycle of cosmic manifestation and activity, whether of a universe, solar system, or planet. The Maha Manvantara is, the Maha Manvantara of a solar system or life of Brahma is a period, oh my goodness.
That's trillion. I figured that out. That's 311 trillion, 40 billion, probably give or take a billion terrestrial years.
I'll leave it at that, terrestrial years.
Thank you so much. Could you, you did such a great job. Could you go ahead and read the text that points to these two definitions?
Okay. The occultist accepts revelation as coming from divine, yet still finite beings, the manifested lives, never from the unmanifestable one life, from those entities called primordial, man, Dhyana Buddhas, or Dhyan Shohans, the Rishi Prajapati of the Hindus, the Elohim of, or sons of God, the planetary spirits of all nations who have become gods for men. He also regards the Adi Shakti, the direct emanation of the Mula Prakriti, the eternal root of, thank you, the eternal root of that, and the female aspect of the creative cause, Brahma, in her Akashic form of the universal soul, as philosophically a Maya and a cause of human Maya. But this view does not prevent him from believing in its existence so long as it lasts, to wit, for one Mahamanvantara, not from applying Akasha, the radiation of the Mula Prakriti, to practical purposes connected as the world soul is with all natural phenomena, known or unknown to science. SD?
That's all right. You don't have to read that. Just as a marker to keep us kind of aware of where we are in this Secret Doctrine. We're up on page 10 now. So the predominant idea here is that as long as we're in that time of manifestation, which is during the Mahamanvantara, we accept as, quote, real, unquote, what is ultimately a Maya. All creation, all manifestation is ultimately a Maya, right? But during the time of that Maya, we conditionally accept it as truth or being, or as you could say a graded series of manifested realities. So any thoughts about this? It's an interesting delineation. You know, he gives us examples of these highest deities who are in form, in the form aspect, you know, the Dhyani Buddhas and the Dhyan Chohans, Raji, the Rishi Prajapatis, sons of God. These, from them can come further manifestation, but the unmanifestable one life is not a creator God. That's the upshot of this. Okay, let's move ahead then.
We have a question here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Asha says, if all creation is Maya in all dimensions, then can we say that the absolute is beyond creation and beyond manifestation?
Absolutely. Yeah, because you said in all dimensions, and from the highest aspect, even dimension is Maya. All but the absolute is Maya. And it is, but the word beyond is tricky because it connotes separation. You could say that it is within the absolute, possibly that's more accurate. But it's, in other words, the absolute encompasses this Maya, but it is not this Maya. Because it's important, a distinction, because otherwise when you say the absolute is beyond and therefore separate from, then the principle of God immanent, which is God within every living atom of being, is not possible. So it is, they are in let's see, reciprocally inherent in each other. And actually, as when we move into the an esoteric catechism, which is coming up here in a little bit, we'll get a sense of that light and darkness and light. Okay. Any other questions about this?
Yes, we have a couple. Please go ahead first, Michael.
Hi.
Hi, Michael.
I am finding the thought of manifestation to be somewhat relative. From our standpoint of human beings, manifestation is the things that we see around us, the things that we sense through the physical senses and sometimes higher senses. When we transcend that, we're getting into a different type of manifestation. I can think of, well, isn't the mind of God in a type of manifestation? You go back to the slide of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and it's interesting how God and everything is in a form resembling the brain of humanity. A human brain. And so God is within manifestation there. It's...
Yeah. It's true. One of the best illustrations of it is the idea of the cosmic physical plane. It's from a cosmic perspective, it is the physical realm of cosmic reality. And yet it encompasses our monadic existence, which is for us the most abstract causal source of our being reference that we're capable of imagining, right? Most of us not. Most of us are working on a rapport with our soul, which is actually at a medium, at the lower half of that cosmic physical plane. So yes, it's definitely true that from the lowest level, the first aspect of causal is simply that which you can't see, touch, or feel, right? And so you're right in the etheric levels of the lowest cosmic physical, with those levels of astral and mental, etc. above that, right? But so it very much depends on your perspective. As you were citing, Michael, the idea of the mind of God, which is equated with Brahma himself, it is nonetheless during a period of the Mahamanvantara, or any period of manifestation, is myopic in its nature, which means, the concept of manifest and myopic at the highest levels, and that's an important caveat, right, are identical, right? But you have to bring into keep in mind this, this last sentence where he says, but this view does not prevent, the occultists from believing in its existence so long as it lasts, right? Now, there are those schools of thought, the neti, not this, not that, just moving towards the source, that gives no philosophical weight to any of these intermediate stages. So it's just a different philosophy. Nonetheless, whether they want to be or not, they're bound by them. So. Okay, thank you, Michael. Yeah, you bet. Anything else on this, folks, before we move on?
Yes. Joy, please go ahead.
Yes, sorry, I was just trying to write you a message and it doesn't seem to work. I'm in New Zealand and I'm off to work now, so I'm really sorry I'm leaving. But thank you. Yeah,
well, you
when
can
I
catch the rest of it if you'd like online at makara.us if you want to pick up.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm just
That's
letting you
okay.
know when I join, I will only be staying a short time and leaving each time.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Thank
thanks
you.
for tuning in. Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay.
And
Let's move
then
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
we have one more question from Asha. So the absolute does pervade reality, even though it is beyond it, and
yes.
not it. Is that what you meant by that reference to God immanent?
Yes.
I think I begin to understand, so further explanation appreciated.
Well, if you truly understand, you really should take over this webinar, because this is one of the highest forms of understanding. The concept of God transcendent and God immanent, both being true, it cannot be cognized. It can't be, quote, figured out, certainly not by the lower mind. And once you gain access to the intuition and soul consciousness, this remains one of the great mysteries, probably right up to the highest initiations in our solar system, because we're talking now about the one, not just about the solar logos, which is in our system, the Godhead, but about the absolute, the one. And there is no knowing anything of this, right? And that it can be immanent as it is present as the spark of life in each of us, and as well be transcendent, is one of the great mysteries. So thank you, Asha. Yes. Okay, anything else?
Yes, Francis, what I wanted to say was I think I am beginning to understand. That was my shorthand from the webinar. I don't claim to understand anything. I'm just getting the hints, the beginnings of understanding. So thank you. Thank
yes,
you.
you're very welcome. Yes, well, you can thank HPB, actually. All right, let's move on to a footnote here. Wait a minute now. Let me find my place. Yeah, so we had a footnote in this page. Let's find it here. Oh yeah, after Mula Parkrita, it says, let's see, so, but this view does not prevent him from believing, the occultist, from believing in its existence so long as it lasts, to wit, for one Mahamantara, nor from applying Akasha, the radiation of Mula Prakriti, to practical purposes. So it's, this footnote references Mula Prakriti. So could we have a reader for this description of Mula Prakriti?
Martha S., can you read that for us, please? And you are self-muted.
She's, I'm sure, grappling with it as we speak. I'll choose somebody else.
Okay. Michael, can you read for us, please?
Sure. In contradistinction to the manifested universe of matter, the term Mula Prakriti, from Mula, the root, and Prakriti, nature, or the unmanifested primordial matter, called by Western alchemists Adam's earth, is applied by the Vedantins to Parabrahman. Matter is dual in religious metaphysics and septenary in esoteric teachings, like everything else in the universe. As Mula Prakriti is to undifferentiated and eternal, as Vyakta, it becomes differentiated and conditioned, according to Svetsasvara Upanishad and Devi Bhagavata Purana. The author of the 4 lectures on the Bhagavad Gita says, in speaking of Mula Prakriti, from its, the Logos, objective standpoint, Parabrahman appears to it as Mula Prakriti. Of course, this Mula Prakriti is material to it, as any material object is material to us. Parabrahman is unconditioned and absolute reality, and Mula Prakriti is a sort of veil thrown over it.
Okay, Michael. Well, you negotiated all the Sanskrit very well. This is probably the most difficult possible way of saying that, of differentiating this concept of Mula Prakriti and Brahman. Mula Prakriti is completely unsubstantial, and yet it is you could say, the philosophic root of the whole concept of manifestation, whereas Parabrahman is the absolute in manifestation when it's being considered from the perspective of the manifested universe. And what she's saying is as that they can both be seen as Maya because of their existence within the manifested realm, right? But that Parabrahman is, when considered in terms of its ultimate source, is the absolute which stands beyond manifestation. Okay. And I think this last phrase paraphrases it very well. It's just, Brahman is an unconditioned and absolute reality, and Mula Prakriti is a sort of veil thrown over it. That is the material essence. So difficult, but through repetition, we will come to understand this material better. Any thoughts, any questions about this?
I don't see any right now.
Okay. Okay, let's move on. All right, I'm going to read this myself because we move rather quickly through the slides here. The oldest religions of the world, exoterically, for the esoteric root or foundation as one, are the Indian, the Mazdian, and the Egyptian. Then comes the Chaldean, the outcome of these, entirely lost to the world now, except for in its disfigured Sabianism, as at present rendered by the archaeologists. Then, passing over a number of religions that will be mentioned later, come the Jewish, esoterically, as in the Kabbalah, following in the line of the Babylonian magism, exoterically, as in Genesis and the Pentateuch, a collection of allegorical legends. Read by the light of the Zohar, the initial 4 chapters of Genesis are the fragment of a highly philosophical page in the world's cosmogony, see Book 3, Cryptovidia and the Zohar. Left in their symbolical disguise, they are a nursery tale, an ugly thorn in the side of science and logic, an evident effect of karma. To have let them serve as a prologue to Christianity was a cruel revenge on the part of the rabbis, who knew better what their Pentateuch meant. It was a silent protest against their spoliation, and the Jews have certainly now the better of their traditional persecutors. The above-named exoteric creeds will be explained in the light of the universal doctrine as we proceed with it. Okay, this is somewhat self-explanatory. She's pointing out the fact that the Zohar is deals with the what's called by the Jews the Pentateuch. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Penta, meaning 5, took. Actually, it's 4, isn't it? It's the first 4 chapters. Is a much more esoteric handling of it than you will find in the Christian Bible and the first 4 chapters. Any thoughts about this before we move on?
Yes, you have 2 questions. Joanna wants to know, what is Mazden?
Mazdian.
Okay, that.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's see, it occurs in the previous. Let's go back one more. Yes. Zarathustra was the main, you could say, the avatar of that religion. But I have to be honest with you, I'm not versed in this. Is there anyone among us who can speak to the Mazdian form? It's quite ancient, as she indicates here. I'm always reminded of Joseph Campbell's quote where he says, give me that old time religion. Let's dance with Zarathustra like we used to. And, indicating that old time is a relative term, that you can go all the way back to this Mazdian. But that gives you no information. Is there anyone that can address this? If not,
look up on Google. It says that Mazdian is the superlative pertaining to Mazda, the Zoroastrian deity.
Right. Okay. Well, that's that just gives us a little.
And Francis,
yeah.
Wikipedia says it's one of the world's oldest extant religions, combining the cosmogonic dualism and eschatological monotheism.
Okay, eschatological. Yeah, well, we won't go there. Yeah, it's the phallic nature of the dualistic Christianity, combining that with the non-dualistic beliefs. So anyway, it's I'm sure a profound study, and you would have to look it up to find out more. Sorry, I'm unable to provide more than just that. Okay.
And then
any other questions?
Yes, Asha had a question. What is meant by the light of Zohar? What is the Zohar?
Light of Zohar is just, it's truly an illumined manuscript believed to be channeled, for lack of a better word, by an initiate. It's quite short, and it's therefore the light of the Zohar would be the illuminated quality of the insight into the writings therein, right? It's I think that's what I'm understanding it to me. Yes, any other questions or thoughts?
That's all I see.
Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, so with about 45 minutes left, we're going to be entering into what will almost certainly take us into the next webinar. Let's see, let me catch up with my notes here. So now we come to one of the most important old commentaries in the entire Secret Doctrine, a crowning and distilled description of what we've been reading about over the last 10 pages. First, I'd like to just read it straight through. One of the readers can just read it straight through, and then we'll examine it line by line, concept by concept. We're going to be here for a while, folks. So, to start off, the Occult Catechism contains the following questions and answers. And I'd like to a reader to take it from here. Don't be dismayed, folks, if you're somewhat confounded by this. We will unpack it meticulously as we go on.
Gregory, can you read for us, please? Well, I'm not hearing you.
See if Martha's back.
Okay.
Martha, are you there?
Yeah, I'll read it.
Oh, this would be perfect. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, not necessarily to interpret it, but to read it. Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, the Occult Catechism contains the following questions and answers. What is it that ever is? Space, the eternal Anupadaka. What is it that ever was? The germ in the root. What is it that is ever coming and going? The great breath. Then there are three eternals? No, the three are one. That which ever is one. That which ever was is one. That which is ever being and becoming is also one. And this is space. Explain, O Lanu, a disciple. The one is an unbroken circle, ring, with no circumference, for it is nowhere and everywhere. The one is the boundless plane of the circle, manifesting a diameter only during the Manvantaric periods. The one is the indivisible point, found nowhere, perceived everywhere during those periods. It is the vertical and the horizontal, the father and the mother, the summit and the base of the father, the two extremities of the mother, reaching in reality nowhere. For the one is the ring, and also the rings that are within that ring. Light in darkness and darkness in light, the breath which is eternal. It proceeds from without inwardly, when it is everywhere, and from within outwardly, when it is nowhere. That is Maya, one of the, it says one of the centers. It expands and contracts, exhalation and inhalation. When it expands, the mother diffuses and scatters. When it contracts, the mother draws back and ingathers. This produces the periods of evolution and dissolution, Manvantara and Pralaya. The germ is invisible and fiery. The root, the plane of the circle, is cool. But during evolution and Manvantara, her garment is cold and radiant. Hot breath is the Father, who devours the progeny of the many-faced element, heterogeneous, and leaves the single-faced ones, homogeneous. Cool breath is the mother, who conceives, forms, brings forth, and receives them back into her bosom, to reform them at the dawn of the day of Brahma or Manvantara.
Okay, everybody get that? It's breathtaking.
Indeed. Great breathtaking.
Yes. Okay, so it's okay if you're feeling even more than a bit bewildered. You're definitely not alone. This is about as esoteric as it gets. And it's very much in the language of the stanzas of Zon, which we'll be approaching after we finish the Proem. Become clear as we take it line by line. This catechism is similar in style to all the old commentary, which peppers the Alice Bailey books, as though from the same source. So anyway, we'll incorporate HPB's footnotes as we go and attempt to unpack this. So, the Catechism opens with this line: what is it that ever is? And the response, space, the eternal Anupadaka. HPB's footnote reads simply, in this reference to Anupadaka, meaning parentless. See farther on. The Theosophical Glossary helps fill out this definition of Anupadaka. That's the upper paragraph. And then the second half of this text box is a definition of Anupadaka from later in the Secret Doctrine. So I think it's an appropriate. I really think it's useful to pick up these terms as we go. Otherwise, we just end up reading a series of meaningless terms when we're reading this material. We have to make some effort to gain awareness of what they mean. And it takes, many, it takes going over it many times in order for it to really sink in. But that's true for everybody. So, if you're, like I said, if you're bewildered, just hang in there. That should be the subtitle of the Secret Doctrine, just hang in there, right? So, could we get a reader for the Theosophical Glossary's definition of Anupadaka?
Carrie, can you read that for us? You're self-muted.
Anupadaka, also Aupapaduka, Sanskrit, self-produced, spontaneously generated. One who does not go or come, as others do. Parentless, having no material parent. One who is self-born by reason of his own intrinsic energy, without parents or predecessors from which his existence or activities are derived, applied therefore to certain self-evolving gods. In Buddhism, used with particular reference to the Dhyani Buddhas, who issue forth from Adi Buddha without intermediary agency.
Thank you, Terry. Could you continue, please?
Okay. The term Anupadaka, parentless, or without progenitors, is a mystical designation having several meanings in philosophy. By this name, celestial beings, the Dhyan or Dhyani Buddhas, are generally meant. But as these correspond mystically to the human Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, known as the Manushi or human Buddhas, the latter are also designated Anupadaka. Once that their whole personality is merged in their compound sixth and seventh principles, or Atma Buddhi,
and that they have become the diamond soul, Vajrasattvas, the full Mahatmas. The mystery in the hierarchy of the Anupadaka is great, its apex being the universal spirit soul, and the lower rung the Manushi Buddha, and even every soul-endowed man is an Anupadaka in a latent state. Hence, when speaking of the universe in its formless, eternal, or absolute condition, before it was fashioned by the builders, the expression, the universe was Anupadaka.
Thank you. Great. Okay. So, to help us get a better understanding of the Lanu's response, which was space, the eternal Anapadaka, now let's focus on the space part of it. Here's a few quotes from HPB. One which we've already come across in our reading, and two that will be coming up shortly. Could we get a reader for these quotes on the true nature of space, or space as it is meant in this esoteric catechism?
Catherine, can you read for us, please? You're self-muted. Still self-muted. So let's move on. Okay, let's see if Martha S. is available. Martha, are you there? You're self-muted, so there you go.
There we go.
Okay. So just in the yellow part, not up above, what is it that ever is? Space viewed as a substantial unity, the living source of life, is as the unknown causeless cause, is the oldest dogma in occultism. So are the force and matter, as potencies of space, inseparable, and the unknown revealers of the unknown. They are all found in Aryan philosophy personified by Visvakarman, Indra, Vishnu, etc. This beingness is symbolized in the Secret Doctrine under two aspects. On the one hand, absolute abstract space, representing bare subjectivity, the one thing which no human mind can either exclude from any conception or conceive of by itself. Space is called the mother before its cosmic activity, and father-mother at the first stage of reawakening.
Okay, so those are three quotes. They will be coming up shortly. So any thoughts or questions about these quotes on space?
Tanya has her hand up, so let's see. Go ahead, please, Tanya.
I was volunteering to read.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I'll add you to the list. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's much appreciated. So clearly HPB is not referring to the empty void that science considers to be space. And, you know, it's difficult for us to set aside that conditioning and take into our understanding the idea of the causeless cause, the source of all life, right? I love this description, the unknown revealers of the unknown. It's the absolute abstraction, or what's called bare subjectivity, right? You can't get more subjective than this entity, this identity that is space. So these are two insights on this. You can see how incredibly condensed these responses and sometimes the questions are. Space, the eternal Anupadaka. So it relates the concept that we just were looking at, the idea of the parentlessness and the idea of this bare subjectivity as linked. Okay, so moving on to the next phrase of the catechism. What is it that ever was? And the response, the germ in the root. So we find further teachings on the germ in the root in the Lanu's explanation at the end of the catechism, where he says, the germ is invisible and fiery. The root, the plane of the circle, is cool. But during evolution and Manvantara, her garment is cold and radiant. We find out later in the Proem that the germ is the source of the septenary hierarchy of conscious divine powers. That's the second quote you see there. Who are the active manifestations of the one supreme energy. This also harkens back to the seven skins, right? It's the source of that. So, okay, but how about the root? We get some insight from the final quote on this page. There's one absolute reality which antecedes all manifested conditioned being. This infinite and eternal cause, dimly formulated in the unconscious and unknowable of current European philosophy, is the rootless root of all that was, is, or ever shall be. It is, of course, devoid of all attributes and is essentially without any relation to manifested finite being. It is the beingness rather than being, in Sanskrit, sat, and is beyond all thought or speculation. That doesn't keep us from attempting to think about it or speculate about it. So, any questions about this very short exchange and the definitions of it? What is it that ever was? The germ in the root. Any thoughts? This is territory now that is becoming familiar to us, isn't it? The idea of the root as the essential mula prakriti, and the germ and the root as the parabrahman, right? And it's all indicated right here in the symbol, right? The germ in the root, the point in the center of this circle, that is. So, any other thoughts or questions about?
Roz says, but surely we are within it, so we are part of it. We could not exist without it.
Exactly true. That germ in the root is indicative of the life aspect in the deepest causation, right? Which in turn is the source of manifestation, right? So yes, it's what you say is absolutely true. It's the spark of life that is God immanent. And yet these various and many ways of looking at this are philosophically diverse, right? Anything else?
Francis.
Yes, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. I have a thought. Maybe it's a little different here. When I think of the ultimate beingness, I think of something that is utterly changeless, the boundless, immutable. The immutable principle. And when I think of the germ, I think of something which appears cyclically, because if it were the germ within the root, or in the root, there would be a duality. And I sometimes think of the boundless, immutable principle as pointless.
Right.
If I may say, pointless.
Yeah.
But there's, with the great breath, a recurrence of this germ, it seems to me, as the point which generates every universe, or basically becomes every universe. It's the sort of the ultimate condensation of that which is homogeneous, and it offers up cyclically all variety. So for me, when I look at the symbol, which is of course one of our amazing symbols in occultism, it's a symbol of the sun too. It looks to me like something that should not be forever, but should be cyclically forever. I'm remembering Manly Hall's work, and he basically, you would open one of his books and he said, well, this is how it all starts, and he, or this is what it is, and he shows you a completely black page. There's just nothing there. There's just no form whatsoever. There's no boundedness whatsoever. Now, if we come down, as we say, into the universe, if that's how we're conceiving this, then I can understand the boundedness. I can understand this germ as being ever present. But for me, at least, from my present state of ignorance, which I will say, it is cyclically forever, rather than continuously forever. And the only thing that I find possible of saying is continuously forever is this absolutely boundless, immutable, homogeneous, unchanging principle. The very root of all forever, without cause, and without. Of course, that's one of the great paradoxes, isn't it? It just it doesn't change, and yet it is the sponsor of all change. So
exactly.
So anyway, just a thought on that.
Yeah, I'm so glad.
How it occurs for me, anyway.
Yeah. Well, the Secret Doctrine show starts with a blank circle, and not a circle with a point in the center. And this is, in truth, the plane of the absolute before any form of Manvantaric manifestation. And I would agree with you that that is what must be pointed to in this question of what is it that ever was. And so possibly what's actually in error here is, rather than the Lanu's response, is my inserted illustration, which might be better served as that blank circle. Because if you're going to the point, to the causeless cause, and yet the whole terminology of the germ, suggests this point, right? So it's
well, I do find there must be an arising point. As a matter of fact, it's like the point is forever in a way, but we might say, at least in my terminology, cyclically forever.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because it's the same phenomena, Manvantara after it. Let me say that a better way: succeeding Manvantaras, right? And these great periods of time are endless in their, and they always begin. Once they begin with this, with this symbol, right? But before they begin, there is this other. There's this other thing which ever was. And I would concur. I agree with you, Michael, that this.
Francis, I find that the addition of the circle is like a third step. For me, anyway. You know, all I can do is speak at my present level of understanding or attempted understanding. So in the beginning, there's just no thing. You know, in other words, if no number, shall we say. Then within that boundlessness arises the point. Now we can talk about how it arises, but whatever. And as a result of the arising of the point, the circle appears, giving us a finite universe in an infinite series.
As a ring pass knot of that point. Yeah. Well, actually, the Secret Doctrine begins this way too, because the very first statement is, and I'm paraphrasing, is that I have before me a black ground with a white circle on it. She's looking at these ancient archives, and then she describes this white circle as the mind of God, which is because it is knowable by God, and therefore is Brahman, you know, which is also described in that way as the mind of God. And so even, you're right, even the existence of that featureless circle is in fact a delineation beyond the absolute, which, you know, could only be suggested possibly by, well, what Manley did, you know, showing you a black page, which would be that black ground that the white circle appears on that she describes.
Well, one thing's for certain, that we're getting a good workout in the abstract mind, which we all have to have. You know, it's all part of building the Antikarana, and success will eventuate.
That's right.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you, Michael. Excellent insights, as usual. And as we move into this catechism, he talks about the circle without a circumference, and without a point, and whose point is nowhere and everywhere. So that takes us towards the direction that we were just speaking. So, okay. Yeah.
Tuia's got her hand up, so please go ahead, Tuia.
Hi. So, like, I'm thinking about now coming down from these high realms, and thinking about this as the symbolism of the idea behind everything. I was just thinking about the great invocation, and we could think about this as evocation, as invocation, from the point of light within the mind of God, or from the point of love within the heart of God. So this is universal.
Yes. Yeah, it delineates the three aspects, right? And each could be described with a symbol.
Exactly.
Really good point.
Yeah.
So to speak. Not your comment was not nearly as pointless as your husband's.
I am the point. He's the circle.
Like hopeless, pointless. I don't know.
Oh, very good.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Well, dare we move on? Let's see.
We have another.
Okay. Yes. Another comment.
Yes, you're self-muted. Please go ahead, Carrie.
Just click on your mic icon, and you'll be with us.
Carrie, are you there? Okay, your hand just went down, but you're still self-muted, so did you not have... Oh, now you're muted by an organizer. There you go.
Not by me.
Okay, you're good to go, Carrie.
Carrying on with the less abstract, I just thought the group might be interested to know there's a poem of E.E. Cummings, a part of which I would just like to read to you because it's very relevant. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of a tree called life. which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart.
Wow. I don't think we could have been more primed to understand that poem than at this moment. I thank you for bringing that forth. It's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. The root of the root, indeed. Or the germ in the root. It's the same concept. Okay, any other before we dare to move forward to the next brief exchange?
Nope, that's all I see.
Okay, here we go. So, I'll find my place. I'm rootless. Let's see here. So the next exchange is, what is it that is ever coming and going? The great breath. Right. So could we have a reader for the two comments that will bring to mind what the great breath is?
Okay, Tanya, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
It is the one life, eternal, invisible, yet omnipresent, without beginning or end. It is one absolute attribute, which is itself eternal, ceaseless motion, is called in esoteric parlance the great breath, which is a perpetual motion of the universe in the sense of limitless, ever-present space. That which is motionless cannot be divine. But then there is nothing in fact and reality absolutely motionless within the universal soul. Secret Doctrine 1, page 2. Considering this metaphysical triad as a root from which proceeds all manifestation, the great breath assumes the character of pre-cosmic ideation. It is the fons et origo, source and origin, of force in all individual consciousness, and supplies the guiding intelligence in the vast scheme of cosmic evolution.
Thank you, Tanya.
Welcome.
Yeah, so, linking the great breath with cosmic ideation definitely helps us shed some light on this cosmic. Now we can begin to understand the breath metaphor a bit better because it links cosmic motion with what will, once a period of manifestation has begun, become evolution and thus cosmic consciousness. And that's the link with the idea of cosmic ideation that HPB describes in this last quote, right? So, in other words, the progression of consciousness through the ages can itself be seen metaphorically as a great breath in manifestation, sustenance from the one life. This, in my humble opinion, is the finite effect of the motion described as the one attribute of the absolute, rather than being some kind of A to B form of movement, that it is the inherent nature that will, in manifestation, become both the involutional and evolutional cycles and all that involves, including the concept of ideation and consciousness. So, any thoughts on this exchange, on this idea of the great breath?
I don't see any.
Okay. All right.
Francis.
Yes.
Just one point. I have in my mind struggled with what I consider to be a kind of contradiction between the first and second fundamental of this secret doctrine, namely to reconcile immutability with motion.
Exactly.
I'm just putting it out there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a mystery, and it's something that one has to ponder. I've been at it a long time, and I don't know what we come up with you know, no differentiation, so therefore no motion, to the state of number two, a differentiation and motion. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And here, you know, here we are trying to grapple with this with the lower mind. You know, it's in the nature of a Zen koan that which with that is completely undifferentiated, the causeless cause can have an attribute, and I struggle with that. Actually, you know, you brought this up at one point on one of the earlier webinars, and I've kept it in mind, which I think gave birth to this, what I just said, which is this idea of the potential of pre-cosmic ideation being an attribute that could be associated with the great breath. Literally what she says, or he says, you know, you never know what to call HPB, you know, DK calls her he. The great breath assumes the character of pre-cosmic ideation. That's the only, and I did a search throughout the entire SD, that's the only further information, at least in terms of actual, when the words the great breath are used, that I have found. And it's our only clue as to trying to unravel this apparent paradox.
And to me, that pre-cosmic ideation is absolutely infinite, without the possibility of alteration. Of course, I don't want to get too deeply into that right now, but the idea of absolute...
Well, I don't know when you would, because we're not going to get much deeper than now.
Absolute infinitude seems to me to be the pre-cosmic state of the, well, I call it the self-observation of the absolute deity. It seems to me that absolute infinitude is what is the pre-cosmic condition, and then the narrowing down somehow perceptually to the point, which is that germ. So, you know, out of infinite possibility comes the germ.
Some germ, and that could be equated to this idea of ideation too, which, you know, because this pre-cosmic self-reflection, would you, I should frame this in terms of a question, would you call this self-reflection ideation?
Yes, I would call it at first self-perception, self-observation of an absolutely infinite state where all possibility is present to the eye of the one beholder, and the narrowing of that down and down and down through increasing finitude to an acceptable archetype for the next universe. Right. So I guess ideation is one way to do it, because ideation stands behind every externalization from that pre-cosmic state. Yeah. So I could go with that. You know, it's you know, words are really hard here.
Exactly.
This is about as abstract as you get, you know. So anyway, it's a thought, and obviously we have to work on these things.
Yeah, and you know, maybe as you know, over the next 80 years, which is about how long this webinar series is going to have to last if we get all the way through the Secret Doctrine, we'll get a little more insight into this. But this beginning section, the Proem, is where there is the most focus on this level of the material, of this causeless cause concept. In some ways, it's almost a relief when the next stage is entered, because you can at least, and we're still completely non-substantive, but we can at least get some mental grasp,
Yeah, the mind can do a little. It can do a little. To me, I differentiate the absolute deity, it's pre-cosmic, from the absoluteness itself. And from my perspective, the only thing it can do is become less through lessening perception. It can just finitize. It can't infinitize because it's already there. That's forever.
It is.
It's just a choice. It's a choice, and every one of an infinite series of universes is different.
When you add to that the fact that as it does that, it doesn't change.
That's the point, and that's amazing. That's amazing. And then maybe studying Buddhist emanation is one of the ways to get a handle on that which is the cause of change, but changes not. Some of those old tankas can show it, maybe. Thank you, Francis.
Francis?
Yeah.
While you guys were talking about that, we got a question in from Roz, and I think it's related to what you guys were actually talking about. She wants to know if you can explain what is meant by that which is motionless cannot be divine.
Well, see, this is the big debate that Michael brought forward, which is you would have to either accept this as an article of faith or not. And in order to determine which way you're going to go, you have to come to some understanding of what motion is. And motion is equated with this concept of the great breath. That is motion. And as we move into this catechism, you'll see how closely that becomes related. So there is no easy answer to that question, except what my intuition tells me on this is that something inherent in the life aspect is not motionless. That there is something not A to B motion, not cyclic motion, not directional motion, but in the very livingness that can be called motion. And that's that's basically the only thing I can do with your question. And like Michael and I were just discussing, hopefully, more will be revealed as we get further into the material. But with the caveat that this is where this most knotty, K-N-O, knotty of all philosophical questions are dealt with. So that's not totally satisfactory. I would love to meet the person that could give you a more satisfactory answer. Anything else? Anyone else on this? What is it that is ever coming and going? The great breath. Okay. Notice too, in that ever coming and going, that it's suggesting almost that it's happening simultaneously, just rather than sequentially. Yes, okay, what? Yeah?
Victor has a question. Please go ahead, Victor.
Not a question, just a word. Vibration.
Yeah, well, that's, good, Victor. Yeah, that's, vibration certainly is ever coming and going, isn't it? Yeah, and setting up a vibration is you have to move to the source in order to initiate a vibration. Right. So yeah, thanks for that. Okay. All right, then let's move to the next, and this, I'm afraid, will be our last for this webinar, this time together. Okay.
And
the dialogue.
And
Yes,
Veronica
go ahead.
adds one thing. She says, when there are in existence all the motion, then it is viewed as motionless. And then she adds 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8.
Which is the Fibonacci sequence. That is very relevant. I like that. It actually, yeah, the first one of that series, you could see, actually some proceed at all with a 0. And then goes to the 1. But I prefer just starting with the 1. And the delineation between the two ones is the germ and the root, or even at a more causal level. The one that comes from the one, right? And how many of those are there before you get to 2, right? So, yes. And possibly this itself is motion, because you're definitely in that, in the involutional process, which I think is deeply connected with this idea of motion. Okay.
Francis,
Yes.
Can I say one thing?
Please.
I have one principle with regard to the great breath and motion. And I will say there is no motion without distinction. And so when I look at the great breath, one of the ways I define it to myself is the arising of distinction and the return to distinctionlessness or homogeneousness. In other words, for me, the great breath is homogeneity to distinctiveness and back to homogeneity. It's one way that I try to make sense out of it.
Yeah, yeah. And as we move into the stanzas themselves, I used to know them all by heart, but it took so much maintenance, I had to let it go. But there is one that talks about one solitary ray drops from the Father, Mother, and now I'm winging it. But it's a beautiful pictorial description of what you're talking about. And when we get there, we're going to be having this conversation all over again. Because those earliest 3 stanzas deal with this material in depth. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Francis.
Yes. So, dialogue continues. Then there are 3 eternals? No, the 3 are one. That which ever is one. That which ever was is one. That which is ever being and becoming is also one. And this is space. Okay. This, you'll notice, is a reference to the 3 phases of time: ever is, ever was, and ever becoming, right? Referencing their unity seems to pitch us beyond time. Then identifying this unity as space, which is described as the living source of life and the unknown causeless cause, turns the Lanu's answer into something of a Zen koan, which uses language as an attempt to pitch our consciousness beyond the confines of dualistic thinking. That's the only way you're going to get anywhere with any of this material, by the way. Remember, actual portrayal of these cosmic truths through language is impossible. As soon as you realize that, then you've entered the land of metaphor, right? All language can hope to do is to stimulate our intuition. The source of these highly charged old commentaries, including this Esoteric catechism, is a symbolic language called Sinzar, whose symbols are literally charged with the potencies of the concepts they represent. And those who have access to this symbolic language, such as the Master DK, who was, we're told, one of the half dozen or so sources for the Secret Doctrine, also have the advanced consciousness necessary to experience, to tune into the energies that are emanated by these symbols. So imagine DK's task, or whoever it was that brought this down into word form, when they're looking at a series of symbols that emanate the energy of the reality that substands those symbols, and then being charged with the task of trying to turn them into English words. It's daunting, to say the least. But I have to add that even these masters, while contemplating the highest symbols in the Sinzar lexicon, would be incapable of having a direct experience of the absolute, of space as it has been here described, because they're confined to the solar system in terms of their consciousness, right? It just gives some idea of how highly pitched this material is. Okay, we'll take comments for this, and then we have to pull the plug. Any thoughts as to this exchange? Anyone?
No,
Now,
I don't see it yet.
Okay, it's in terms of time. I'll just, I was very happy to run across this illustration because I think the idea of the three-fold nature of eternity was beautifully illustrated in the abstract here. Same illustrator as the first image in the series. Oh, right. Well, that's probably a good thing. We'll pick up with this slide, with this discussion on this exchange at our next webinar, which unfortunately will not be next month because we're all going to be getting ready for the conference in Chandler, which if you haven't become aware of it, you should Google SRI conference, and I know that brings it up, and take a look. It's going to be a fabulous conference this year. And that will take us through, I think, the first week in May, and which will allow us to have a webinar on the third Sunday of May, which will be the next time we meet. So until then, thank you all so much for attending. I hope you find this as stimulating as I do. So ta-ta for now.
Goodbye, everybody.